Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time once again for another edition of the Curtain Call podcast. My name is Michael Beck, deputy editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, and we are bringing it to you again this week with a very special episode. I should start with my very special co-host, one Mr. Geoffrey Benedict. How are you doing tonight, Geoffrey?
Good as always, Michael.
Well, that's good to hear, I think. Maybe we'll have to dive into that a little bit later, but we have a very special guest. As always, we like to bring some people on with us, and a former Behind the Steel Curtain contributor, now with DK Pittsburgh Sports, Christopher Carter. Chris, how you doing tonight?
Doing great, fellas. Glad to be back with BTSC doing something. That's where I got my writing started, so always happy to rejoin the old community and talk some football.
Oh, great stuff. We're super excited to have you on. I guess there's some pretty big news today that we should probably get into first.
Maybe.
Chris, I'll throw this down to you right away. Just your initial thoughts on the retirement of Vince Williams. And I'm sorry for everyone who doesn't know that information yet, but Vince Williams hanging him up after 8 seasons in the black and gold. Chris, what's your initial reaction?
My initial reaction is it's unfortunate, I think, for Steelers fans who were looking to get one more year of Vince Williams, knowing that he's always been a tough guy, a leader, a guy who forged his own way into the NFL. Nothing was ever handed to him. He was a 6th-round pick. As Geoffrey posted on Twitter shortly before we went live here, one of my articles I wrote way back in law school when I was just blogging on the side. It was about Vince Williams earning the respect of his teammates as a 6th-round draft pick rookie when the Steelers faced several injuries at inside linebacker, and he was their last guy on the depth chart, and he held down the fort. And over the years, Vince Williams, they drafted several guys to sort of take over that position, whether it was Ryan Shazier or Devin Bush, but he's held on that entire time and was able to make things happen. Now, of course, he got released earlier in the offseason. Then he was signed back with the Steelers after it looked like he didn't get to sign anyone. But what's interesting about this is that my initial thought was, maybe, he showed up and the physicals weren't right, or he wasn't feeling right. And he was like, I've done this game long enough. I'm good to go. But when you all saw that tweet from Terrence Garvin early in the week, their former teammates and linebackers of the Steelers, that leads me to believe he knew that this was coming. It's kind of odd that this was something that was going to be led into in a surprise, but Vince has always been his own man. He does things his own way. I think it's unfortunate for Steelers fans that wanted to see one more go round with him. But, one thing to remember is that he played a physical brand of football his entire career, and that takes a toll on a body. And I think after a while, it's like, sometimes it's just not worth it when you keep going through it.
Geoffrey?
You want my thoughts on Vince Williams?
Yeah, you can throw him out.
Okay. My thought is he is that guy, that leadership, that attitude, that tone setter kind of a player. There was a great article I read in the offseason where they were talking about him being kind of the last in the line of the Steelers linebackers that were just there to hit people and just crush your soul. And we're moving into a new era, right? Devin Bush isn't quite that guy. You've got a guy like a Buddy Johnson who could be that guy, but now Vince is gone, right? And it makes me think the same thing with the loss of Marquise Pouncey, where we're bringing in a young center, where we've got some youth on the offensive line, and you're kind of looking at that veteran leadership, and it's gone, right? So I think that's the part that concerns me. Is that the Steelers have lost a lot of leadership this offseason, and Vince Williams in the locker room is going to be a presence that'll be missed. But Chris, with Vince Williams retiring, where do you see the competition for that number 3 linebacker? Clearly, Robert Spillane's probably in line to move into the number 2 linebacker, but where do you see behind him going? Do you think the Steelers need to bring in somebody, or do you think they're going to compete with what they have on the team right now?
I could see the Steelers bringing in someone, but not someone expensive, not like a big name or anything. Just, hey, we're going to bring in an extra body here. They indicated in minicamp and even before minicamp that they were comfortable with Robert Spillane being the number 2 with Devin Bush. They liked the way that he helped against the run and covered underneath. Those are things that they're going to be excited to see him do more often now that he has had experience under his belt. Vince Williams was primarily, especially at this point of career, a run-stuffing and pass rushing linebacker. But when you asked him to be in coverage last year, it wasn't even what it used to be where it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. That is where I see them saying like, okay, who do they have that can step up in that role? You got Buddy Johnson, the guy they just drafted. But when I asked Keith Butler about Buddy Johnson, he's like, whoa. We got to see if this guy can play special teams first. So there's a little bit more hesitancy on Buddy Johnson than I think some of the fans will have. But watch out for Ulysses Gilbert. That guy, if he can stay healthy, will probably be the initial backup when it comes to passing downs. But I'm right with you. They need another guy that could be a run stuffer. Maybe they go out in free agency, grab one more guy. This is typically also why Kevin Colbert leaves some money laying around going into training camp. Now they have more. They still have closer to $10 million left on their salary cap. With the still after David DeCastro and getting the few deals they just got done. But still, I look at this and I think they may want to go get a guy just to have another body, because Vince Williams really completed that linebacker room as that bigger physical guy that could be the energy in the middle. Now you're going to need that physical guy who's going to challenge people, plug up the run, be more physical at the point of attack, because you want Devin Bush to be a free roamer. You want him to use his speed sideline to sideline. If he's getting caught up with fullbacks, tight ends, and guards that are getting to the second level, that's going to make it harder for the defense to work with him in his best position.
I'll load up the super chat really fast here from Dave Shipley, who puts $5 in the tip jar. He says, the only constant in life is change. Love the show, guys. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. If you have a question for Chris, just throw it in the live chat and I'll make sure to get that in there. Chris, what do you like? I saw this on Twitter from you earlier today, resharing some old memories of Vince Williams, of course, intercepting Tom Brady and cuddling DeAndre Hopkins in the end zone. Well, I don't think anyone's quite had a career quite like Vince Williams, but what will you remember the most from his time in Pittsburgh?
I'll remember the night Shazier was paralyzed, and I was there in Cincinnati with DK Pittsburgh Sports. And I remember being in the press box, and I just remember when Shazier was down and we didn't know what was happening. I just remember looking around and this is the first time I've ever been watching a football game, and I don't care what happens, because every other game I've been like, okay, what's good? Even if it's not the Steelers, if it's the Jets versus the Jaguars, okay, what's happening right now? But that game, I was just like, I don't care what goes on. And to go into that locker room afterwards and to talk to that team after they gutted out an amazing comeback win with all the drama in it, going to Vince and seeing him just halfway just broken as a man, just being like, that's my brother out there that happened to. And the feeling that he had behind him, and to know the story. Vince Williams didn't like Ryan Shazier when he got here. And I remember him talking about this. He used to say, when they drafted him in the year after Vince Williams showed that he was a starter caliber linebacker as a rookie, they drafted Ryan Shazier. He took it as a challenge. He took it as an insult. And he said they worked to train together. And he said he would intentionally try to show up earlier to a workout than Ryan Shazier, or work harder than him, try to be harder, get in his face a little bit. And he said all he ever did was just show up and take every opportunity in front of him. And he said Ryan Shazier earned his respect throughout Ryan Shazier's rookie season, because he saw, okay, this guy isn't just some stuck-up first-round draft pick. He's a guy that's really that really wants this. So to hear how that relationship progressed over time, and how Vince Williams went from being that rookie to being a voice in the locker room that matters, to being a guy that basically was the checker of running backs and fullbacks when it came to the backs on backers drill. Those are the things I remember most. And I made that joke, that the post as a joke with the Patriots and the Hopkins moment, which I also was there to see. But it's still I think it's the presence that he became for the Steelers that became the soul of the team.
How much of a loss do you think that is to the Steelers in training camp? Is that because it seems like one of those things, it's an intangible. How much does that matter on game days, and how much does that matter in training camp?
It does. It matters a ton. You need guys that are going to bring energy. You need guys that are going to set the tone. Now, here's the one thing I'll say is, because he's been such a good tone setter, I believe Vince Williams has set the tone for Devin Bush and the other guys to understand it. We spoke with Robert Spillane during the offseason, and in speaking with him, he was like, listen, and this was before Vince Williams was even brought back the first time. He was still at the point where he was retired, and Robert Spillane was like, we have to fill the void that left. And so they recognize what that is. But I think Vince being around for Robert Spillane, for Devin Bush, they saw the tone that he set as a linebacker, and that carrying over from the Ryan Cheesier and the Lawrence Timmons days. Those are things that I think will resonate carrying on. But certainly when you're missing that presence in the locker room, there's going to be times you're like, man, I miss that guy. But the Steelers have always been an organization. They find the other voice for that in the room to make up for when they lose one of those guys.
Do you have any kind of predictions on how that roster spot will be filled? Does it necessarily have to be a linebacker? Could they go safety, known commodity? I know you did mention this earlier. Could they circle back on Avery Williamson? Is there one sort of avenue that kind of makes the most sense to you?
I don't think there's one sort of avenue that they're going to stick to, because one, don't forget, with that money that they still have left, there's still space to make another room. We've all been talking about or speculating on Malik Hooker or this or that and the third. We don't know what Kevin Colbert's got planned, because here's the other thing to remember is that other teams still aren't set on what their plan is. Remember, Joe Hayden was brought to this team because the Browns let him go with training camp. And they're like, oh, wait, we'll go snag him. The Steelers are waiting around to see who that can happen with. Now, Melvin Ingram, they were like, okay, we're going to pull the trigger on that guy because we know he can contribute. And Melvin Ingram could be part of this solution. As I wrote for my Carter's Classroom on Tuesday for DK Pittsburgh Sports, I reviewed a bunch of his film. Melvin Ingram isn't just an edge rusher. He lines up on the interior sometimes on passing down. They've used him as an off-ball linebacker, and he's even had an interception in doing that. So, and that's not something you'd ask him to do like every play or, in 20 snaps a game, but you could rotate him in there and help out in that position. He could be part of the answer. And all of that's going to get determined over the next couple of weeks of camp and leading into the Hall of Fame game. I think then that's when then we'll see the Steelers. Okay, who's out there? Who needs to make a move? And what are other teams desperate for? We saw Cam Akers. He's out for the season with Achilles injury. People were speculating, the Steelers should send Benny Snell to the Rams. There might be a deal like that in a whole bunch of other positions. There might be a team that's like, hey, we'll give you such and such for James Washington because our receivers went down. Those are all things that could play out. And that's one thing that I've learned in my time covering and following and studying the Steelers. Don't commit to something or commit to an idea. This is definitely the thing, because there's way too many possibilities out there. Kevin Colbert, he keeps all doors open so that he can make the move that he wants to make to better the organization.
All right, we got a super chat here. I want to bring up real quick. Chris, how do you feel about our defensive backs at this point, especially at cornerback?
I think your Steelers, they got a really good situation going on here. A lot of people are sleeping on them because they lost Steven Nelson, they lost Mike Hilton. But this is a team still. I'm higher on Joe Hayden than most people are. People say, oh, he's gonna fall off that cliff. Joe Hayden's not a guy that ever relied on his speed. Even when he was at his youngest and at his best in the league, he was a guy that was all about positioning, technique, handwork, footwork, being the smarter guy on the field and winning those battles. He's still that player. And when I see that happen, then I'll check it off and say, okay, he's done. But I don't see that happening anytime soon for a Joe Hayden. I actually think he's going to be a guy that can be relied upon moving forward. I also see Cameron Sutton. He's a guy that I've been really ecstatic about ever since he was a rookie. In fact, in his rookie season, in that same Bengals game we're talking about, he took over for Joe Hayden for a half and had to cover AJ Green and looked just fine doing it. Over the years, he's found ways to make himself valuable. I think he's going to be solid. Now, one thing that I keep reminding people about the slot quarterback, because they're like, what about Mike Hilton? He did so much. And I agree. Mike Hilton was one of my favorite people to talk to in the locker room because he was very open. He talked about a lot of technique. He had great instincts. He understands football. He's a very high IQ when it comes to football and life things. But with Mike, don't forget, he was an undrafted free agent when they brought him in. He was a guy that came in and in camp earned his mainstay. That's what they're expecting to come out of a Shakur Brown, a Trey Norwood, a James Pierre. Well, some of those guys are going to have to step up this year. I wouldn't be surprised if one or two of them do. And don't forget, Justin Lane's still out there fighting for his NFL career. So there's going to be a couple guys that step up there. And I think what makes this a lot better is knowing that you have a Minkah Fitzpatrick behind you. Terrell Edmonds, a very solid, strong safety, despite what many people might say. But Minkah Fitzpatrick, when you have the best safety in football, calling the shots, playing the deep ball back there, you as a cornerback feel much more comfortable being aggressive, playing your role, and making plays. I think this secondary is a lot better than some people give it credit for.
if I can follow up on that, you brought
Sure.
up James Pierre, and I need to state that I know there's a James Pierre hype train running pretty seriously around Pittsburgh right now. I actually after the playoff loss, I had to do a film room on that game, and I was like, I don't even know what to write about, and I ended up writing an article about James Pierre as one of the few bright spots that occurred in that game. And since then, one of the things I've been thinking about is he had so few snaps.
Yeah.
In this season. But when you go through and look at each snap, his film is really good. Like, he did a great job in the limited time he played. I'm used to short sample size being like, okay, this person put up good numbers, good stats in a short sample size. But how do you deal with analyzing a player who has put up really good film in a short sample size? Does that because does that translate? Is that going to say, hey, this guy should be this good next year? Or are there things that we have to be cautious about when looking at his film and saying, wow, this kid is smart. He's a good player.
I mean, you should always be cautious when looking at a small sample size, because if you did that, Peyton Hillis would be the greatest running back of all time. And if you remember him from his Browns days, that was quickly short-lived. But I will say this about James Pierre. The things that I saw about him were good technique, was solid following through on basic cornerback fundamentals. And those are the things that transition into your future. And if he can build on that, that's solid. I can tell you, I watched this man play in minicamp. Granted, no pads, it's football and shorts, but he was active. All the hype that you were hearing about it, I was like, Chris Carter was giving a thumbs up. I'm like, hey, I'm behind that hype. Now, my colleague, Tony Serino, when we're on the Locked On Steelers podcast, he believes in the James Pierre hype train. He's the official starter of that. He started it months ago, and he continues to believe that he's going to be the next Rod Woodson, with the running joke there. But I do think that he's going to be a better contributor than people give him credit for. This year, what's going to be interesting is when he comes to camp, how consistent is he? Does he maintain how he looked in minicamp? B, when he does get in the game, does he stick to those fundamentals? Does he communicate well? Is he on the same page with everyone else? And then C, does he get lost in the sauce when he starts to get more saps? If you see that all those things start to check the boxes, he could end up being the guy the Steelers are like, you know what? When Joe Hayden's done, Cam Sutton might be the number one and he might be the number two, and we have no problem with that. And that could be the next, big story of the Steelers. Like, hey, guys that forged their way forward, like a Vince Williams, that you didn't think that they were going to be a star on your team or a consistent starter for, a better part of a decade. And that's what he could work his way into. But we got a long way before we go there. I like the fundamentals I see. I like the understanding of the game that I see. I want to see that at a more consistent basis when we get more of that sample size. But all things are checking all the boxes right now, Jeff.
To transition a little bit to kind of look more into training camp itself, would you have any favorite storyline that's kicking around right now? Because obviously there's a ton of stuff going on with the Steelers, but I'm curious to know what your favorite storyline surrounding this specific Steelers training camp is.
What's Mike Tomlin's favorite saying when he's pushing his guys up against each other? He likes to say, iron sharpens iron. Man, he's this whole thing about Devin Bush versus Najee Harris. Sign me up. I want to see these guys run with each other. I want to see what these guys challenge each other. These are two premier athletes coming in here. And Devin Bush, with 2 years of experience under his belt, he was also given the all clear earlier today from according to several sources. So we are ready to see Devin Bush go full on in camp again. Najee Harris looking good, looking healthy. I want to see those two challenge each other, because here's the thing. If Najee Harris is able to go out here and make plays in camp against this defense that's going to be loaded and with an offensive line that's going to be still forging itself, I think you can see this offense actually doing the same thing to a lot worse defenses that'll be out there this year. And vice versa. If Devin Bush is challenging Najee Harris and we're seeing some great battles, this could be a thing where that relationship where they push each other and they grow from each other. You always say you want your practice to be harder than your game, because when it is, then the game's a lot easier and things come more naturally to you. If Devin Bush can be the guy that Najee Harris is like, man, he's the toughest guy I face all year, that means he's going to be doing a lot better against the linebackers he faces in the NFL when they're actually playing on Sundays and Mondays and Thursdays and sometimes Wednesdays now. It's a weird schedule the NFL has. But in all seriousness, I think that's a great storyline. Now, you could talk about the offensive line. That's a huge storyline. You could talk about Ben Roethlisberger. You could talk about the backup quarterback situation, the cornerback situation, which we just discussed. But to me, those are two stars where if Najee Harris is a star for this team and this running game is ranking, even if it's just ranking in the upper 20s of the NFL, not even like the top 10, not even the top 15. If it's close to like 23, 22, 21, and the offense is still doing the same thing through the passing game, the defense doesn't miss a bit, this team is going to be right up in that mix again, competing for the AFC North crown, definitely in the playoffs, and maybe even pushing teams in the playoffs this year.
Okay, Chris, are there any positions where the internal position battle is something that you think is really going to be a good story for training camp? Are there any position battles you're really watching?
I mean, I'm looking at the cornerback position because the slot cornerback is wide open. And I'm not sure if it's a situation where if no one truly emerges there, does that push Sutton to the slot, and then does James Pierre take over the outside, or does someone else do that? I think that's going to be a big thing. I think the number 3 inside linebacker spot could be something that's wide open. I'm really intrigued by Arthur Mollett and Trey Norwood as backup safety options for this team because everyone's talking about Malik Hooker, but Trey Norwood's a guy that I liked. I liked him in minicamp. I liked his tape in college. Remember, he had the most interceptions in college football last year, tied for it at least. He's a guy that can make those plays. Arthur Mullen, I liked his tape with the Jets. It was with the Jets, so it was tough to, really splice apart too much. But there were a lot of things that he did that I was like, hey, that's sound. That's not, I'm trying to be a flashy playmaker. That's a, hey, you understood your role and made the play happen here. I want to see how those guys shake out as far as backing up Minka and Terrell, because those are going to be big things there. Other than that, who shapes out on the offensive line? Does a core 4 work out at left tackle? Does Zach Banner be able to be healthy enough at right tackle? Can Trey Turner, Kendrick Green, and Kevin Dotson become an interior trio that bullies people the way that some of these Steelers past trios have really done so? There's tons of those storylines all across the board that I'm going to be watching all over the place. I think the one place that I think is pretty solidified is the receiver room. We know Chase Claypool is going to be a big part of this. We know Deontay Johnson is going to get separation. We know Juju is going to be a tough over-the-middle guy. We know James Washington is probably going to get some jump balls this year. That's the one room I think everyone's pretty confined. But you can look across this roster. There's several places where there's going to be some good battles.
One of the spots you didn't touch on that Geoffrey and I have gone back and forth with a lot over, especially after the draft, is the Steelers' defensive line. They carried an extra guy than they typically do last year, and then on top of that, they're bringing all those guys back, and then they drafted Isaiah Loudermilk. Who would you suggest might be the odd man out on the chopping block? Because I think both of us, Geoffrey and myself, have said there's no way that they can possibly carry 8. That seems like a little bit much. So is there one guy on the defensive line that right now looks like the odd man out?
It's a good question. I certainly see that there could be some interesting battles here. One thing with Isaiah Loudermilk, it's that when we were talking to Carl Dunbar, he kind of noted it was mainly his build, because when you look at him, he's built like Cam Hayward, size, weight. That's what that. Yeah, right. I mean, there's that similarity there. Now he doesn't have the nastiness that Cam Hayward had when he played at Ohio State, but there's still that size there. So that's what they want to work out. You look at Alualu, he'll stick around. You look at Wormley, his experience will win him over. I'm looking at those bottom guys. Remember last year when Carlos Davis and Isaiah Buggs were going at it on the sidelines? I don't think that was because, there was a miscommunication. I think that was because it's like, hey, rookie, you're starting to step up when I need to be stepping up, and there's some serious competition there. Carlos Davis, in very limited sample sizes, did some things to impress me. I think it could be Isaiah Buggs. If he does not show up this year in camp and show that he's ready to take on a more serious role, they might be like, all right, Buggs, we've given you every chance. Of course, they want to see him progress. We'll see how that goes. But I don't see him getting rid of Loudermilk. And, I think it'll be interesting as Carlos Davis can dig up into Isaiah Buggs this year. That could be a difference maker. But certainly they want to have their depth on the interior defensive line because they want to keep those legs fresh for Cam and Tuitt when it comes to those big moments in the big games.
When you talk about the defensive line, you brought up Carl Dunbar, who, in my opinion, has done a fantastic job coaching the defensive tackles. I want to ask you, because we're talking about the secondary, I want to ask you about Terrell Austin. And have you had any interactions with him? Have you gotten to talk to him? What he's like, and is he the secondary coach? Is he the guy like I've always kind of referred to it as like Keith Butler is our pass rush coordinator. He does the front seven, and it seems like the film, the secondary has completely changed since Terrell Austin came on board. Do you think there's been a shift where Terrell Austin is kind of running the Steelers secondary?
I mean, he coaches it. I wouldn't say running is the right word. What I think that Terrell Austin does is he helps this group become better at attacking the football. That's where you're going to see his impact the most, is like, hey, let's be in position well enough in these schemes to make sure that we're playing the football and not necessarily just scrambling to stay alive here and to challenge things. I think that's where you're going to see Terrell Austin's impact the most. And I mean, hey, Minka Fitzpatrick, he's already doing that. Cam Sutton, there were times that like he was just like an inch away from a big pick six last year. I think you get more of a chance to see that, especially with those young guys like Sutton, like Pierre. That's where you're going to see Terrell Austin's fingerprints on here. I'm not sure if it's he's going to run the show with the secondary, but I do see him being you see his fingerprints being on these guys, maybe getting more turnovers. Again, they've invested heavily into this defensive front. You got Melvin Ingram to rotate in with Alex Highsmith and T.J. Watt, and now you still got Cam and Tuitt. That's a front now where you got 4 of those guys or 3 of those guys are guys who were ranked in the top 10 of their positions. By ESPN when they went across the league and talked to everybody. Now you got Melvin Ingram and Alex Highsmith on the rise. You still got Devin Bush and Robert Spillane backing those guys up. That's going to allow this secondary to get a little bit more aggressive and prey on quarterbacks who are trying to get rid of the ball quicker. That's where I think you start to see Terrell Austin is how well are they in position to make those plays. I think that could be very interesting.
One of the things that was kind of circling the internet, especially today, and really the last couple of weeks, was some kind of inside information that Ben Roethlisberger is once again in the best shape of his career. Rolls into camp today wearing a shirt that says "different," I believe, on it, and it looks like he has a little bit of a pouch, a little belly going on there, and he was completely eviscerated by the internet on that today. Are you buying into like this kind of talk that Ben Roethlisberger is completely bought into this scheme, this offense? His diet's crazy. Is he really taking it to this next level, or is he deserving all this kind of critical thoughts that are really being tossed his way, especially today?
I think people like to read too much into everything. It's the NFL. When the smallest things happen. I mean, look at the past couple days. There was a simple rumor popped out and people were popping out, oh, Xavier Howard's going to the Steelers. And it's like, okay, calm down. Everybody relax. This is not that serious, folks. But that's why the NFL is king. The mildest speculation could be the greatest news story in all of sports at any moment when it comes to the NFL. When it comes to Ben Roethlisberger, we know what it is. There's a lot of national media members who criticize the Steelers and criticize Ben Roethlisberger, even when it's kind of like, why are you criticizing them? They're undefeated at this point. That doesn't seem realistic. As far as the diet thing, I think Ben's been taking care of his body pretty well over the past few years, because that's why he's still here. If he wasn't, I don't think he'd be able to play right now. He may have intensified a little bit more now that he's out of his rehab and he had a full year to kind of think about that. And I thought the picture of him, cool. But, it wasn't one that made me say, whoa, that guy is svelte. It was just more so one that was just like, okay, he's ready to go. He's Big Ben. It's time to see what he's got this year. The biggest thing for me with Ben is he going to have a balanced attack? Can the running game get going? If it does, I want to see him throw closer to 30 to 35 times a game than closer to 38 to 45 times a game. He does that. That's going to balance out the offense. It's going to keep the defense off the field a lot less, and you're going to see him be able to be more selective with when he wants to throw the ball down the field. There's a lot of things that'll go on with that, but to me, I think the Ben, the healthy stuff, I think it's more just, hey, we don't have football to watch right now, so we need something to talk about. So here we go.
Okay, Chris, if Ben has a good season this year, right now he's around 11,000 something like that yards short of Peyton Manning in total yards. Do you think if Ben has a good year, do you think he sticks around? Because that's 2 more years. If he has 3 years left in him, he can retire ahead of Peyton Manning in passing yards. Is that something feasible? Do you think that's something that could happen?
I don't see 2 more years. I could see 1 more year right now. Now here's the thing. if we're at next year and he's still able to throw the way he did last year, and that's the thing. A lot of people were like, "Oh, his deep ball was bad," and like, well, he threw like 11. He had like the fifth most deep ball touchdowns in all the NFL last year. But if he's still throwing like that next year, I'll be like, okay, yeah, maybe he could do another year after that. But it's kind of one of those things where I it's just going to depend on how much more he can get in the tank. Does he avoid injury? Does he, is he able to stay away from the big hits and someone hitting his arm and messing things up? And does he play all the games each season? Does he suffer a minor injury, or do they get to a point where last year they skip a game? Do they, those type of things? Is it possible? Sure, and especially because now they also have an extra game each season to do this. Now that could also tack on to it, but. I think it's way too far. It's funny. I actually asked my first ever question that I asked to an athlete was when I was in high school. Jerome Bettis visited Taylor Alderdice High, and I asked him if he thought he would catch Eric Dickerson's rushing record, and he was like, "I don't know, man. That's a lot." And that was like he had about 3 more years left before he retired, and sure enough, he caught it. And I was like, so that happened. But you never know. Those things can happen. Guys are staying in the league much longer these days. If he can avoid injury, maybe, but I wouldn't bank on that. I would especially say if the Steelers do well this year and he's still healthy, he'll evaluate next year and say, hey, do I feel like putting my body through this one more again? Because I'm sure Ben would love to. Like, you think about the average person, me, like, man, like as soon as I'm done with y'all, I got a beer waiting for me back in my fridge. Like, I want to be Ben's got to take it easy on that kind of things. He can't do the things that we do as average human beings. So there's that point when you're 39 years old, you're like, man, I am tired of eating kale, drinking tons of water every day, working out at these odd times. It is hard on me, and I'd like to be able to relax and be with my family and beautiful kids and enjoy the things that I've earned with the hundreds of $millions that I've earned in my time in the NFL. That's where I see his mind being. But again, if he's healthy, he'll figure, and he likes the situation, the Steelers, and he's like, hey, why not? I can see that happening, but let's take it one step at a time. Get through this season healthy.
Beautiful. Chris, before we let you go, is there anything you want to plug on your way out?
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me on, fellas. If you want to follow more of my stuff online, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques, as you see below here. You can also read my work at DKPittsburghSports.com, but you can get my daily Steelers podcast on the Locked On Steelers podcast, anywhere podcasts are hosted, but especially on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and the app Odyssey. That's AUDACY Odyssey. Also, if you want to hear me more, I'm on the Friday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast, where we're talking all about the NFL with your boy Q from Locked On Raiders. So tons of different ways to reach me. Hit me up anytime. I'm very open to talking to fans and anyone else. Got any questions? I'm here for you. So thanks again for having me, guys. This is always great to join you guys at BTSC.
Oh, it's our pleasure. You must have that exit outro rehearsed down to a T. That was great stuff.
I just didn't ask for a 5-star review with a positive comment.
There it is. Awesome stuff. Christopher Carter from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Thank you so much again. All right, Steeler fans, if you are watching on YouTube and Facebook, just hang tight. We will jump into a quick little break here. So if you're on the podcast platform side, all you have to do is click over to part number 2. All right, Pittsburgh Steeler fans, we are back with the second half of the Curtain Call podcast. Once again, I am Michael Beck, joined with Geoffrey, Benedict, and we will have a trio, hopefully a trio. I only have confirmation from one of the guys, but there is some new shows popping up at BehindTheSteelCurtain.com as we venture into the regular season. Some exciting stuff for everyone. I know Brian Anthony Davis has broken it down a couple times, but we will have the guys from the Steelers Power Half Hour joining us at some point here in the last half of the show. So we're very excited for that. But on top of that, we do also have a single solo show from a certain co-host of mine, one Mr. Geoffrey Benedict. I believe it's called On the Steelers Cutting Room Floor, if I have that correct. Geoffrey, are you excited to go solo and break away the shackles that is myself?
Yeah, the training wheels are coming off, Michael. It'll be fun. I'm really what I want to do with the show is I'm going to be looking at what I see from a film side that doesn't make it into film rooms, stuff that I want to talk about, mostly focused on like things fans can look for in the next game. like what's showing up in film that is either a trend that needs to change or something that could be developing in a really good way. Stuff like that. It's kind of like give fans a heads up what they should be looking out for in the coming games, and that'll be my show. That is the working title. I've got some other ideas. Hopefully, I come up with something a little less long than that.
So on the topic of brand new shows, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chris Pugh, Joe Frost, and Paul Yanchek. How's it going, gentlemen? Welcome to the Curtain Call. I'm guessing the first time on BTSC Radio. I'll start with Chris on this one.
Yeah, how's it going, guys? It's great to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you on. How you doing, Paul?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having us.
Oh, our pleasure. And Mr. Joe Frost, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm an hour earlier than everybody else because I'm on Central Time. So everybody else who's struggling with the late hour, I'm good to go.
I actually got you beat because I'm on the Pacific time zone here on the West Coast. So I got you.
What is it? Morning there, right? It's like morning.
Pretty much.
Yesterday, I don't know about time zones.
It's a good morning in Canada, eh?
Yeah. Okay, you guys got me. But the brand new show on Behind the Steel Curtain. I guess the easiest way to break down these questions, we'll start with Chris, then go to Paul, then finish with Joe. Just going through the reading order here, so everyone's not talking at the same time. But where did this kind of idea come from, hosting a Steelers show, and why exactly did you guys want to start this podcast with Behind the Steel Curtain?
Yeah, it's great. I have my own podcast network that talks about stuff in Ohio, and we put a Steelers podcast there, which obviously doesn't make too much sense. So we got this opportunity. We saw the article on Behind the Steel Curtain, and we said, man, we want to be here. So I had a lot of great conversations with Brian. He helped us figure out a title, what we could do with the show, and we're excited to be here. I got to tell you, Ohio football is rough. I've been a lifelong Steelers fan. I've lived here for all 46 years of my life, and it's been fun for the past 20 years because the Browns and Bengals have been a redhead stepchild. It's been fun hitting them around every year. But last year, and I'm bitter, if the Steelers win 4 games this year, and we're going to win a lot more than 4, please beat the Browns and Bengals twice. You don't understand what Browns fans are like. They won the last game of the year, which was a practice game. They needed to get to playoffs. We almost beat them with Mason Rudolph, and they got cocky. They're like, look at us. Half the team went into COVID. I don't know what's going on in Berea, but they're like spreading COVID around like super spreaders. They come into Pittsburgh. I can't explain what happened to playoffs. Somehow they beat us, whatever. But believe me, I work in media over here. The past couple months, the Browns are going to be 20-0. Every time there's negative stories about the Steelers, everyone gets excited. We've got to set them straight. And the Bengals, I don't know what happened in that Monday night game last year, but it personally offended me because I'm hearing from all these Browns and Bengals, and I use air quotes, friends. So come on. We're going to talk about the Steelers this year, but please, for love of God, beat the Bengals, beat the Browns. That's all I got to say.
I want to throw in here. I grew up in Ohio, in Eastern Ohio, and I can attest to just how terrible Browns fans are. For those of you on the YouTube show, I'm gonna show you this, guys. It's I just got this shirt at the Strip District. It has an outline of the state of Ohio, and it says "worst state ever" for those of you on the podcast side. But that's to my former home. So yay, Ohio.
So Paul, why'd you hop into this podcast, Steelers podcasting game?
Yeah, well, I clearly, after hearing Chris, you can see that we need to create a group therapy session for Chris, just some of these pent-up hostilities going on. No, I grew up, born and raised in Cleveland, but I've been a Steelers fan my whole life. The first football game I remember watching was one of the Steelers-Cowboys Super Bowls, and I was hooked ever since. And 4 years ago, I got my freedom and came here to the promised land of Pittsburgh, where we put French fries on everything. And so, when Chris first got in touch with me and said, want to talk about the Steelers, it was a no-brainer. So looking forward to this new venture for us.
And I want to make sure do you prefer Joe or Joseph?
Joe's fine.
Beautiful. Joe, same question.
My Twitter handle is Frost Joseph D, but yeah, Joe is fine. What's my question? Is it the same question?
Yeah, same thing.
Awesome.
Why the Steelers? Why the podcast game?
Yeah, man. Okay, so I was born in Ohio, moved away. I was in Florida. I was in Kansas City, and then came back to the Cleveland area. And so I was a Browns fan. I was young. I didn't know any better, and actually, I cared more for baseball at the time. So I was much more interested in baseball teams at the time. So and I followed the Browns, and then this was the '90s. The Browns went away. And then there was no one to root for, and there was only people to root against. I had a roommate who was a just obnoxious Steelers fan, and so I'm watching them with hate, like you do, and realizing, oh, that's what it looks like when teams do well. Oh, I see. It's more fun to root when the teams play well, and the style of play that the Steelers were playing at the time I was into. So I really sort of switched allegiances at that point. After I got out of college, I moved to Virginia, and now I live in Mississippi, where there are a lot of Saints fans, and I'm okay with the Saints. That's fine. But the Steelers are really in my heart. So when these guys were doing some podcasting last year, just going through the season, I would follow what they were doing, and I chimed in a couple of times, and they're like, all right, you need to come on this thing. We all got to know each other in college, so we've been friends for a long time, and it's just been fun to gather with friends and argue about the Steelers. Mostly four. But sometimes when you just got to shake your head when you go 11-0 and then other things happen, you're like, what's going on? Hurts your heart.
So we can get a bit of a flavor from the podcast. Well, I guess kind of a preview of what's to come as these new shows come down the wire. I'll ask all you guys questions, including you, Geoffrey. Just, of course, this has been a very busy week. One of the topics, Geoffrey, we didn't actually get into with Chris Carter in the first half of the show was Melvin Ingram. I'm curious, your side of things. I know you did the film breakdown on him. What did you see from Melvin Ingram, and how does he change this defense?
He actually reminds me at this point in his career, kind of a James Harrison. Not the elite strength, right? Like don't think I'm going there. No one is quite that guy, other than James Harrison. Melvin Ingram is smart. He's got a good set of moves. He reads the play. He reads the offense really quick. From just what I'm looking, he looks on film like a guy who studies film, like who really gets the tendencies of the offense. There were times they're trying to throw something, a little different at him, and they're never fooling him, right? He's that kind of a player. He has lost a step. If you look at his 2017 film compared to 2019, 2020, he's a different player. He's not as fast as he was. But I think if he's a guy that could give us, the 5.5 sacks James Harrison gave us when he was 36, 37, at 32 years old, if Melvin Ingram can be that kind of a player, I think he's also a good fit because he's a similar style of player to Alex Highsmith. When he was in his prime, that's what we're hoping Alex Highsmith can be. Very similar style of player. So I think he's a great addition in that kind of, a number 3 who could be a number 2 in a pinch, outside linebacker, and he's just going to be a good guy to have in the room.
No, absolutely. Chris, I'll throw this one over to you now. Vince Williams, of course, retires today. What was kind of your initial reaction to that? Because I think that one surprised and really caught off guard all of Steelers Nation. What were your initial thoughts, Chris?
Well, I've been, frantically refreshing Twitter a billion times today because I had the hope that Steven Nelson was coming and Mitchell Schwartz and everybody else. But realistically, it shocked me. Put Twitter down for an hour and Vince Williams retires. It frustrated me, but the more I thought about it, I love Vince Williams' toughness. I love Vince Williams' leadership. But Vince was getting a little bit up there in age. I look at Spillane and Devin Bush as your top 2 linebackers. They drafted Buddy Johnson in the 4th round. I think there's still some questions about Buddy Johnson, but you play guys like that. You don't cut 4th round draft picks. So I think with all that stuff going on, maybe Vince didn't see as much of a place for him on the team. And you got to think about this too. Melvin Ingram, I've seen a ton of highlight packages over the past couple days about Melvin rushing from the inside. Now, he's an outside linebacker by trade, but I could see him being lined up inside, maybe on third downs as well. So I hate to say it because in my heart of hearts, I think Vince deserves to be on the 53, but I think maybe Vince didn't see a path to him on the 53 for one. And secondly, it sounds like his heart maybe not been into as much as it used to be. So I thank Vince for his years. I love the fact he came back on a reduced price contract. But if your heart's not in it and maybe you didn't think you were going to make the 53, best wishes. Thank him for the years he had. And hopefully these new guys can pick up the pace for him.
And on top of that, too, there is now an open roster spot that the Steelers are going to have to fill. Paul, I'll throw this one down to you. Do you have any predictions on how the Steelers use this new spot, or are they going to try to sign one more big name perhaps this offseason? Will it just be like a college guy? What kind of vibe do you think this team is going to kind of chase?
I would love to see them still look to solidify some depth in our secondary. I think that's one of the areas that I'm still nervous about. Who exactly they go after, obviously, is going to be the big question mark. I'm not aware who's still on the open market right there. But I would love to see them focus heavily on finding somebody, even if a Melvin Ingram who's maybe taken a step back but is still a solid enough player to contribute. That way, if we have one injury, we're not scrambling and suddenly relying on just pulling guys out of nowhere. So somebody who's got some experience, even if he's maybe on the downside of his career, someone who can give us a good solid year and help solidify some more depth at the secondary.
Gotcha. Now, this offseason was one when it first started. The cap dropped. I think the only moves a lot of Steelers fans were expecting were that of cuts. Sure, a few of them did come down the pipeline, but of course the Steelers have had to make a bunch of moves after that. So, Joe, to you, I'm curious what your favorite move of this offseason has been to this point.
Ooh, that's a tough question. I think some of the tougher choices that they've made with some of the cuts that they've made that freed up enough money to go out and pick up somebody like Ingram, pick up a couple of these other players and even be in a position to still be able to make moves. Yeah, there were some real difficult cuts early on. People that you're sad to see go, but you got to make those difficult decisions when you're working with limited cap room and you got a couple of people who may not be around next year, that some of that money may come back. But I'm making a couple of those difficult decisions that freed up some cap space to be able to get some of these new names.
Gotcha. One of these things, Geoffrey, this coming week, I guess the coming month, really, that we'll have to look out for as Steeler fans, which is one of the big storylines of this training camp. What's going to happen at center? Of course, the Steelers are returning J.C. Hassenauer. They brought back a familiar face in B.J. Finney, and they drafted Kendrick Green. Are you leaning any which way right now as who you think will be the favorite to be the starter in week one? And is this a job that might be a third-round pick to lose?
I think it's B.J. Finney to start. I don't think they're going to push Kendrick Green into that kind of position to be a week one starter as a third-round pick who, is kind of learning the center position. B.J. Finney in 2019 was a really good center, and he earned a shot to be a starter. And then COVID messed him up. And by his account, COVID ruined his ability to work out. He wasn't in proper shape. There was a lot of mess going on. If he can get back to being the guy he was in 2019, he's a starter. He is a, bottom third of the league starting center. But he's still a starting center. Kendrick Green, I think by the end of the season may pass him. But for week one and starting out, it's B.J. Finney.
Gotcha. Getting back to the idea of this brand new show, Chris, I'm kind of curious how all you guys know each other. If you can break that down for us.
We know each other since college. Paul, Joe, and I, we were best friends, but we all hung out together in college. And last year about this time, I was like, man, I want to start a personal podcast on the Steelers. Kind of looked at my friends on Facebook that were Steelers fans, reached out to Paul. We fall in touch a little bit in the last couple of years. It's been a while since we've been in college, and we're getting older here. But, Paul and I quickly reconnected. We did, and we loved working together. Now, I got to tell you this. Joe said don't mention it, but, hey, I feel honest with you guys. I got to say where it's at. Last year, dream season, we're 10-0. Paul and I are, just podcasting away. Everything's good. Then Joe wants to come on. We bring Joe on, and guys, I'm trying to figure out what happened with the season last year. I blame us. What happened here? I mean,
how dare you, sir? How dare you? I can't believe this. We're on this new network for like 10 minutes, and already you're going to bring this up.
Well, we've got it.
I can't control what they're doing on the field. Did I give them some kind of advice that you think ruined that great season?
Weird things were happening we couldn't explain. I mean, I'm sure it was like that with you guys. I mean, how do you explain the stuff that was happening? I hate to say it.
So how many games, if the Steelers start like 3-0, 0-3, 0-4, how many games does Joe get before you kick him off the podcast?
We love Joe. I mean, we keep him even if it was 0-17, but I can't believe it's going to be 0-17. It's got to be better.
If we got anywhere near 0-17, I would quit. What?
No.
My gosh. It would have to be me at that point, right? It would have to be.
And Joe's coming on this great Steelers network and talking about I used to be a Browns fan. I don't know, guys. I'm very conflicted and confused right now.
They moved away and became the Purple Browns of Baltimore. What do you want from me?
Okay.
I have a couple ideas.
The old Browns, to be fair, the old Browns were a legit team.
They were.
They have never been a legit team at any point, even last year. They have never been a legit since they came back.
Right. Well, when they came back, it was like, well, I can't do this. And then, different times, I moved to different cities and I rethink, do I need to, root for the hometown team? It's like, no, I don't really want to do that. I want to stick with my Steelers. I'm fine.
Well, this is my education.
I would say I didn't know, Joe, when we first met, all those years playing trumpet together, that you were still a Browns fan for most of that. That's kind of like I feel like my whole life has been a lie now.
Listen, okay, so we went to college in Canton, Ohio, right? So one of the years, the jazz band that Paul and I played in, he played first chair trumpet. I played second. Yeah, the whole time. Paul always beat me. I never could crack into that first chair. But our jazz band played for the Hall of Fame festival, not really the ceremony, but the year that Chuck Noll was put in to the Hall of Fame. That was our claim to fame, right, Paul? As a jazz band, as musicians, that we played Chuck Noll into.
It's all been downhill since then.
It's all been downhill from there. Yeah. For some reason, they haven't invited us back this year. I mean, I don't know what the deal is.
Okay, I have an idea for a fun exercise. I'll throw this out to Paul first. Can you break down the other guys of the show and what we should expect from them?
Chris is the one who Joe's like already anticipating my answer, I think. Chris is going to be the. Chris can easily get stuck. He'll find the tangent, the thing that will deeply burden his soul. But other than that, he's very much the realist, the analytical. Joe is the eternal optimist. Joe always sees the bright side of even the worst scenarios. Living as a Steelers fan in Cleveland, to kind of protect myself from the brutality, I always kind of like downplay our chances, and I'm kind of like doom and gloom. And so but Joe, that may have been the problem too last year, is Joe began to rub off on me and I started feeling good about our chances. And then
I came in at 10-0. What do you, why wouldn't I be optimistic at that point?
Even at 10-0, I'm like, oh, these are ugly wins. I don't know. So yeah, I'm perpetually anxious that the bottom's going to fall out from under us. So I guess that's kind of where I come from, unfortunately.
We need you to break down Joe, though, Paul.
Yeah, Joe, he's the optimist. He's the guy who's going to see the silver lining no matter how bad things look, no matter how rough things are. Even when the Steelers get embarrassed in the playoffs, he'll still find the positives to take away from it. So he's always kind of pulling us off the edge of the abyss. And so he's I think if it wasn't for him coming on when the season fell apart last year, it would have been Chris and I just yelling and screaming. And so, yeah, he's that good positive balance.
There was still a lot of yelling and screaming, to be fair, but it was justified.
I have to load this super chat up really quick if I can click on it properly. There it is. Derek Sessions puts $5 in the tip jar. It says Frost Joe, second chair podcaster. Is that a reference to something?
Band, maybe? I don't know.
Anywho.
I'm not sure.
So
thank you. I appreciate that.
I'll turn the next question over to you, Joe. Here, maybe you can give a compliment sandwich to your other podcasters. A couple positive things about each guy, and maybe one negative slid in between. Maybe you can start with a breaking down Chris. It's just gonna be great content. I have
Chris always comes in. He's a born journalist, so he comes in always very well researched and very well thought through the things that he's bringing to our podcast. He's the person that we rely on to really set us up as what the sort of structure of what we're going to talk about is. For in a lot of ways, Paul and I just come on and talk, and Chris sets it all up. So it's always really helpful to have his organization and his research that goes into what's going to make a good podcast for us this week. Is this the part of the sandwich where it's got the negative part?
Oh yeah.
The one thing I'll say about Chris, which is kind of enjoyable for us, we could take a kind of pleasure in trying to guess where Chris is going to go sometimes. He'll get things just stuck in the back of his mind, and they'll just really bother him. And from week to week, we'll still argue about how there shouldn't be two professional athletes that have the same name, and that's just wrong. And he gets really frustrated by it. So it becomes a game of how do we continue to respond to the things that really bother Chris. And for all of Paul's, what he's saying is his negativity. It all comes from a very strong understanding of what should be happening in these games. It's a frustration when something that should be obviously happening isn't. So his heart is, deeply rooted in Steelers fandom, and he just gets disappointed when it doesn't go as well as he knows that it can. And I'm just here to pull him back from the abyss and say, but remember, they can do it. They can. And he's like, yes, that's true. So, we balance each other out pretty well all the way around, trying to keep some good humor, but also, trying to bring some good analysis to what has just happened. What did we just watch?
Perfect. Now, Chris, it's your turn to take the floor and break down your co-host in whatever order you want to take that from.
And now complain about us. There you go.
Nothing to complain about. I can't believe you guys are taking shots at me. I mean, real quick, I just questioned Mike Sullivan. I'm sure is a great quarterback coach. I'm sure he's going to do great with the Steelers. But why do we normally pick a Mike Sullivan when he's also the coach of our hockey team? I don't know. These are the things that go around my mind. So I appreciate the fact Joe says I'm well reasoned, but I still got these wild card thoughts in my mind. But
absolutely.
No, but honestly, Paul and Joe are great people to work with. It's fun. It's nice to podcast with people that you've hung out with and you like and talk about stuff that we love talking about. I mean, we're Steelers fans. It's great to talk about this team. They can frustrate us at times, like the last couple of games of the season, but it's fun being part of them. I guess the only negative thing, and I got to address this to Geoffrey, we don't have the same merch deal set up as I see Michael, Paul, and Joe have. I mean, we haven't even done a show yet, and you see, Paul got hooked up with merch from somewhere, and Joe did, and Michael has.
It's
Where's
called
my
the
merch?
store.
Come on.
You just go to a store and buy something, man.
Okay, well, I'm feeling plain here.
Fan.
Yeah.
You guys got to get one of these, one of the official behind the steel curtain.com shirts.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get Jeff Hartman to hook the squad up, but he's the senior editor. He's the one with all the money, so we'll throw
All
it in
that
his
money.
direction.
He's got the big bucks.
Okay. Well,
Yes.
I can be bought. If anybody out there wants to sponsor me, I can be bought. Just donate some stuff. I'm in. That'd be great.
Oh, beautiful stuff. It is the top of the hour now, so I think we will sign out. But before we get there, Geoffrey, was there any film rooms that the people should know about?
Yeah, we just Dave Schofield and I did a Vertex on Melvin Ingram and what he brings to the Steelers, and I've got another TJ Watt sack party one coming out. It's queued up. There's been a lot of news, so it's been sitting waiting for a spot to get published. But that should be coming out here shortly. That's it for me.
Awesome. So Chris, Paul, and Joe, all your Twitter handles are currently on the screen, right? That is right. Okay. So I'll read those out for the people on the podcast side. If you want to follow Chris, that is C Pew Steelers, of course, is the handle. All one word. Paul Janchek, one word, of course, again. And Frost Joseph D, if you want to follow the newest members of the Behind the Steel Curtain podcast team. And, of course, before we sign out, I do want to remind you to click over to behindthesteelcurtain.com. There's been a ton of information dropping, of course. The Steelers showing up at training camp was a bit of a surprise. We thought they would be there tomorrow, as in Thursday, but they showed up on Wednesday. Vince Williams' retirement, a ton of breakdown on Melvin Ingram. So make sure you're clicking over and checking out all that great content because there really is a ton of it. Aside from that, I want to thank all our guests today, including Chris Carter from DK Pittsburgh Sports, the guys from the Steelers Power Half Hour, which will be debuting very soon on the Behind the Steel Curtain Network. And, of course, Geoffrey Benedict. And once again, my name is Michael Beck. Thank you for tuning in. We will catch you guys next week.